The taste of death was sweeter than she'd imagined. Copper and moonlight and centuries of longing compressed into a single, forbidden kiss that made her mortal heart stutter against her ribs like a caged bird sensing its final flight. Wait, before the next revelation happens, if this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. Elena Blackwood pulled away from the vampire's lips, her breath forming clouds in the frigid midnight air of the abandoned chapel. The village of Thornwick lay sleeping below the hill, unaware that their most sacred warning had just been shattered by the blacksmith's daughter. Around them, crumbling stone walls bore faded murals of saints and demons, their painted eyes seeming to witness this transgression with eternal judgment. "You shouldn't have come here," Lucian Ashmore whispered, though his pale hands remained on her waist, contradicting his words. His eyes, silver in the moonlight streaming through the broken roof, searched her face with an intensity that made her feel both seen and devoured. "They'll know. Your people always know." Elena touched her lips, still tingling from contact with something that shouldn't exist. "They've known you were here for months. They know you haven't killed anyone. That's why they haven't come with torches and wooden stakes." Yet. Lucian released her and stepped back, his dark coat swirling around him like living shadow. Even in his withdrawal, he moved with a predator's grace that 4 centuries of existence had refined to an art. "They tolerate me because I hunt the wolves that threaten their livestock, because I keep to the old manor on Widow's Peak and don't enter their homes uninvited. But you, Elena, you're their daughter, their hope. This changes everything." She wrapped her threadbare shawl tighter against the October cold, though the chill she felt had nothing to do with weather. At 23, Elena had already survived the fever that took her mother, the accident that left her father with a limp and their family in debt, and 3 marriage proposals from men who saw her only as a means to acquire her father's smithy. She had not survived this long only to live by rules written in fear. "I came to warn you," she said, her voice steadier than her hands. "Dorian Ashcroft arrived from London yesterday. He's been asking questions about you." Lucian's expression, usually schooled to aristocratic indifference, cracked to reveal something ancient and dangerous. "Ashcroft, that name is a curse older than your village." He moved to one of the chapel's empty window frames, gazing out at Thornwick's scattered lights. "What kind of questions?" "About the old manor, about whether anyone's seen you in daylight, about whether any girls have gone missing." Elena joined him at the window, maintaining a careful distance that felt like miles. "He claims to be a scholar studying local folklore, but Mrs. Weatherby at the inn says he carries silver bullets and reads from a leather book written in Latin." "He's a hunter." Lucian's jaw tightened. "The Ashcroft family has been hunting my kind since the Crusades. They're relentless, methodical, and they don't care about collateral damage." He turned to her abruptly. "You need to stay away from me, Elena. Forget this happened. Forget tonight. Forget every conversation we've had in this chapel over the past 3 months." But she couldn't forget. Wouldn't. Their first meeting had been accidental. She'd fled to the abandoned chapel after overhearing her father arranging her marriage to Thomas Brennan, the butcher's son who drank too much and smiled too little. She'd been crying against the altar when Lucian emerged from the shadows, and instead of the monster she'd expected, she'd found someone who listened. Who understood what it meant to be trapped by circumstances beyond your control. "I won't abandon you to face a hunter alone," Elena said quietly. "Tell me how to help." Lucian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You're mortal, Elena, fragile as autumn leaves. Ashcroft would snap your neck just to get information about me. Then we need to be smarter than him." She pulled a folded paper from her pocket. "I drew this at the inn while serving dinner. Ashcroft left it on his table when he went to his room." Lucian unfolded the paper, his expression darkening as he studied her sketch. It showed a map of the surrounding countryside, with Widow's Peak marked in red ink and strange symbols drawn around the borders. "These are binding sigils. He's planning to trap me, probably using your village as bait. What do the symbols mean?" "They're meant to create a barrier that would prevent me from leaving a specific area. If he activates these sigils at the locations marked on this map, I'd be contained within a 3-mile radius of Thornwick." Lucian crumpled the paper. "He'd then systematically eliminate my options until I'm forced into whatever trap he's prepared." Elena's mind raced. "The autumn festival is in 3 days. The whole village gathers in the square." "Perfect hunting ground," Lucian finished grimly. "He'd use your people as leverage, force me to show myself to protect them, then kill me in front of everyone as an example." He looked at her with something that might have been regret. "You see why you must stay away. This is the world I inhabit. Strategy and death, always moving, always hunted. It's no life for someone like you." "Someone like me?" Elena's voice sharpened. "You mean someone weak? Someone who needs protecting? Someone who deserves more than darkness? I choose my own life, Lucian. I always have." She stepped closer, close enough to feel the unnatural cold that radiated from him. "You told me once that you came to Thornwick to escape. That, after centuries of playing the monster, you wanted to simply exist, to find peace. Peace is for the living. Then perhaps you need a reminder of what living looks like." Elena reached up and touched his face, her warm fingers against his marble-cold cheek. "Fight back, not just against this hunter, but for something, for the right to exist without apology." Lucian caught her hand, his grip gentle, despite the inhuman strength she knew he possessed. "If I fight, people will die. They always do. If you don't fight, you will die, and Ashcroft will move on to the next town, the next vampire, the next massacre." She interlaced her fingers with his. "Help me understand your world. Teach me how these sigils work, how hunters think. Together, maybe we can find a way that doesn't end in blood." For a long moment, Lucian studied her face as if memorizing every detail. Then he sighed, an unnecessary habit from his human days. "You're asking me to trust you with knowledge that could destroy me. I'm asking you to trust me because I already know the most dangerous secret of all." Elena smiled sadly. "That you're not the monster they believe you to be. That somewhere beneath 400 years of survival and solitude, there's still someone who remembers what it means to hope." Lucian's expression softened. 3 months ago, I thought I'd forgotten how. Then a blacksmith's daughter stormed into my sanctuary and reminded me that not all humans wield pitchforks and prejudice." He gestured to the altar. "Sit. If we're to outmaneuver a hunter trained by centuries of inherited knowledge, we'll need more than courage. We'll need a plan." They sat together on the cold stone steps, and Lucian began to explain the intricate lore of hunters and the hunted. He described how the Ashcroft family had perfected their craft over generations, studying vampire behavior the way naturalists studied wolves. They knew how to track by scent, how to predict movements, how to exploit the weaknesses that all vampires shared. "Sunlight is the obvious one," Lucian said, sketching invisible diagrams in the air. "But it's not instant death as folklore claims. It's more like, imagine burning from the inside out over the course of minutes. Painful, but not immediately lethal if I can find shelter quickly. What about holy water and crucifixes? Symbolic power only affects those who believed in their human lives. I was a cynical bastard even before I died. He smiled slightly. But silver is real. It disrupts our healing, leaves wounds that scar even our flesh. And wood through the heart? That stops us like it would stop any creature. Destroys the vital organs we still require. Elena absorbed this information, her practical mind already working through implications. So, Ashcroft will want to corner you somewhere you can't escape quickly, somewhere with limited exits and maximum exposure. Exactly. The autumn festival gives him the perfect stage. Lucian stood and paced, his movements as fluid as smoke. But there's something else troubling me. Ashcroft is here alone, which is unusual. Hunters typically work in pairs or groups for exactly this kind of scenario. Maybe he's arrogant. You said the family has been doing this for centuries. Perhaps he thinks he doesn't need help? Or perhaps he's not alone at all. Lucian's eyes narrowed. Elena, has anyone new arrived in Thornwick besides Ashcroft? Anyone who might seem unremarkable but has been asking subtle questions? She thought back over the past few weeks. There's a woman who bought the old Ravencroft cottage. Says she's a widow from Yorkshire looking for a quiet place to paint. And a traveling merchant set up shop near the mill, though he hasn't been particularly successful selling his wares. Describe them. The widow is middle-aged, always wears black, keeps to herself. The merchant is younger, friendly but awkward. He seems to fumble his sales rather than close them, like he's more interested in conversation than profit. Lucian cursed in a language Elena didn't recognize. They're watchers. Ashcroft has already positioned his team. The widow is probably tracking my movements from a distance, and the merchant is gathering intelligence on village routines. He gripped the window frame so hard the stone cracked. We're already in the trap. He's just waiting to spring it. Fear coiled in Elena's stomach, but she forced it down. Fear was useless. Action was everything. Then we spring it first, on our terms. Elena, listen to me. She stood and moved to face him. You know this area better than any of them. You've been here for months, studying the land, the patterns. And I know these people, their habits, their fears, their gathering places. Ashcroft might have centuries of inherited knowledge, but we have something he doesn't. What's that? Each other. A vampire and a human working together. That's not in his playbook. Lucian studied her for a long moment, and Elena saw the exact instant he made his decision. It flickered across his face like lightning illuminating a dark sky. You're right, which means we need to move quickly before he realizes we're collaborating. He pulled her toward the chapel's entrance. Come, I need to show you something. They descended the hill through woods that seemed darker than natural night, following paths only Lucian could see. Elena had to trust his guidance completely, letting him lead her around obstacles she couldn't perceive. It felt like a metaphor for what she was asking of him, blind trust in unfamiliar territory. After 20 minutes, they emerged at a clearing Elena had never seen before, though she'd explored these woods since childhood. At its center stood a circle of standing stones, ancient beyond memory, covered in moss and moonlight. This is a threshold place, Lucian explained quietly, neither fully of your world nor fully of mine. The old Druids built it millennia ago, before Christianity reached these shores. It's one of the few locations where the barrier between realms grows thin. Realms? Elena approached the stones carefully, feeling the air change as she neared them, thicker somehow, charged with invisible energy. The space where my kind originated isn't quite hell and isn't quite another dimension. It's complicated. Lucian joined her in the circle. What matters is that places like this can amplify certain abilities. Blood magic, binding spells, ancient contracts. Why are you showing me this? Because if we're going to beat Ashcroft at his own game, we need to turn his trap against him. These stones could be used to create a binding sigil far more powerful than anything he's planning. But it would require— He hesitated, looking away. It would require your blood willingly given, and mine received. A vampire bond. Elena's heart hammered. What does that mean exactly? It means you would carry a part of me, and I would carry a part of you. Not a complete transformation. You'd remain human, but you'd gain certain advantages. Increased strength, sharper senses, the ability to feel my presence and know my location. In return, I'd be bound to your life force. If you died, I'd follow within hours. That sounds more like a weakness than a strength. For me, yes. For you, it's insurance that I can never harm you or allow you to come to harm. It would also make you completely unreadable to Ashcroft's magic. He tracks vampires by their energy signature, but you'd register as something entirely new, something he's never encountered. Elena walked around the circle, her mind working through possibilities. We could feed him false information, make him think you're vulnerable when you're not, or that you're alone when you have an ally he can't detect. Precisely. But Elena, you must understand what you'd be giving up. A vampire bond is permanent. You'd be tied to me for the rest of your natural life. If you ever wanted to marry, to have a normal existence. I've never wanted normal, she interrupted. Normal in Thornwick means marrying Thomas Brennan and spending my life birthing children I can't feed while he drinks away our earnings. Normal means dying in the same small house where I was born, never seeing beyond these hills. If you're offering me something different, something that lets me choose my own path, then yes, I accept. Lucian looked stricken. You should take time to consider. I've been considering for 3 months. Every night I've come to this chapel, I've been choosing you over the safe life everyone expects me to live. She stood in the center of the stone circle. Tell me what to do. For several heartbeats, Lucian remained still as death. Then he moved with that supernatural speed, appearing beside her. Kneel here, he said softly, guiding her to the circle's center. Face north. Clear your mind of fear. Elena obeyed, her hands steady on her knees. The ground beneath her thrummed with old power. Lucian knelt behind her, his presence a cold pressure at her back. I need your wrist, and you need to understand this will hurt. Not the bite, but the bond forming. It will feel like fire in your veins. I'm the daughter of a blacksmith. I know fire. She extended her left wrist. He took her hand gently, reverently, and she felt his breath, unnecessary but habitual, against her skin. Once this begins, we can't stop halfway. You must see it through to the end, no matter the pain. I understand. Then may whatever gods still listen forgive me. Lucian's fangs pierced her wrist. The pain was sharp but brief, a sting like a needle. What followed was unlike anything Elena had experienced. Cold fire raced up her arm, through her shoulder, spreading across her chest like ice water in her veins. She gasped but didn't pull away. True to his word, Lucian held her wrist gently, taking only what was needed. Then he raised his own wrist to his mouth, tearing it open with casual efficiency. Drink, he commanded, 3 times, no more. Elena hesitated only a moment before pressing her lips to the wound. The blood was cold and tasted of metal and midnight, but underneath lay something else. Memories that weren't hers, emotions 4 centuries deep, loneliness so profound it made her want to weep. She swallowed once, twice, 3 times. The world exploded into sensation. Everything sharpened as if she'd been living underwater and finally surfaced. She could hear night creatures moving in the underbrush 50 yards away, could smell the distinct scent of each type of wood in the surrounding forest, could see the individual ridges on the standing stones in detail that should have been impossible in darkness. And underneath it all, a golden thread connected her to Lucien. She could feel his presence like a second heartbeat, could sense his location even with her eyes closed. "Breathe," Lucien said, his voice seeming to come from inside her head and outside simultaneously. "Let it settle. Don't fight the changes." Elena focused on breathing, on anchoring herself to her body even as it transformed. The fire in her veins gradually cooled to a warm simmer. When she opened her eyes, the world had shifted slightly. Colors were different, depth perception altered, everything more immediate and present. "How do you feel?" Lucien asked, still kneeling behind her. "Alive," she whispered, "for the first time, truly alive." He helped her stand, and she noticed the difference immediately. Her body felt lighter, stronger, balanced in ways it hadn't been before. When she looked at Lucien, she could see him more clearly than ever, not just his physical form, but the subtle energy that animated him, the ancient power coiled beneath his civilized exterior. "The bond is complete," he said. "You're marked now, Elena. Ashcroft will sense something different about you if you get close to him. Then I'll be careful." She flexed her fingers, marveling how responsive they felt. "How long until the effects stabilize?" "A few hours for the physical changes. The mental connection we now share will strengthen over days. Eventually, you'll be able to project thoughts to me if you concentrate, and I to you." He pulled her toward the circle's edge. "We should return to the village. Dawn isn't far, and you'll need rest. The bond takes energy to establish." They made their way back through the woods in comfortable silence, though comfortable wasn't quite accurate. Elena could feel Lucien's anxiety through their connection, his worry that he'd doomed her to a half-life between worlds. She wanted to reassure him, but didn't have the words yet. Instead, she sent him a feeling through their bond: determination, certainty, and something that might have been joy. She felt his surprise in return, then a reluctant warmth that made her smile in the darkness. They parted at the edge of Thornwick as the eastern sky began to lighten. Lucien squeezed her hand once before disappearing into the shadows, moving faster than her enhanced vision could quite track. Elena walked home slowly, testing her new senses, cataloging every change. Her father was already awake when she entered their cottage, stoking the forge fire for another day of work. He looked up as she entered, and for a terrifying moment, Elena thought he could see the change in her. But he just nodded and returned to his work. "You were up early," he commented. "Couldn't sleep. Walked to clear my head. Thomas Brennan came by yesterday evening, asked when we could formalize the arrangement." Her father's voice was carefully neutral. Elena poured herself water from the bucket, buying time. Her enhanced senses could detect her father's heartbeat, could smell the coal dust and metal shavings that clung to his clothes, could hear the slight wheeze in his breathing that spoke of years inhaling forge smoke. He was 53, but looked older, worn down by hard labor and harder losses. "Papa," she said gently, "I need to tell you something. I'm not going to marry Thomas." He set down his hammer. "Elena, I know we need the money. I know the arrangement would secure our future, but I can't spend my life with a man I don't love, doing nothing but surviving." She moved to his side. "There are other ways. I could take in sewing, sell remedies at the market. Mrs. Weatherby has been asking if I'd help at the inn during busy seasons." "Those are temporary solutions to permanent problems." Her father sighed heavily. "You're 23, Elena. The village will start to talk if you're not settled soon." "Let them talk. I've never cared much for their opinions anyway." She kissed his weathered cheek. "Trust me, Papa. I have a plan." What she didn't say, that her plan involved defeating a vampire hunter, protecting an immortal creature, and somehow finding a way to live between two worlds without being destroyed by either. But those details could wait. She spent the day working at the inn as planned, serving meals and listening to conversations. The autumn festival preparations dominated every discussion. Who would provide the harvest feast? Whose children would perform in the traditional play? Whether the weather would hold. And underneath it all, whispered conversations about the scholar staying in the best room, about how he'd been seen walking the perimeter of the village at odd hours, about the questions he asked that seemed innocent but felt probing. Mrs. Weatherby, who'd run the inn for 30 years and knew everyone's secrets, pulled Elena aside during a lull. "That Ashcroft fellow gives me a chill," she said quietly. "Something wrong about him, though I can't put my finger on what. The way he looks at people, like he's measuring them for coffins. Has he said anything unusual? Keeps asking about the old manor on Widow's Peak. Wants to know if anyone's seen lights up there or movement. I told him it's been abandoned since the previous owner died decades ago, but he just smiles like he knows different. Mrs. Weatherby dried a glass with more force than necessary. Also caught him questioning my youngest about places in the woods where strange things might happen. What kind of scholar asks a 12-year-old girl about strange things? The kind who's looking for vampire hiding places, Elena thought. I'd keep young Mary away from him if I were you. Already have. Told her to stay in the kitchen when he's about. Mrs. Weatherby leaned closer. You be careful too, Elena. I've seen how he watches you when you serve his table. Not in that way men usually watch pretty girls, but like you're a puzzle he's trying to solve. Elena's blood ran cold. Had Ashcroft somehow detected the bond? It had only been hours, surely not enough time for him to sense anything, unless he was even better at his craft than Lucian believed. She finished her shift and left the inn as twilight descended, hyper-aware of every shadow and movement. Her new senses picked up everything. The baker's wife arguing with her husband 3 houses away, a cat hunting mice in the grain storage barn, horses moving restlessly in the stable, and something else. Someone following her. Elena didn't change her pace or indicate she'd noticed. She walked her normal route toward home, past the butcher shop and the smithy, toward the small cottage she shared with her father. But as she passed the alley between Miller's warehouse and the cooper's workshop, she suddenly darted sideways, using her enhanced speed to move faster than a normal human could manage. Her pursuer, expecting her to continue straight, stumbled past the alley entrance before catching himself. Elena got a clear look at him in the fading light. The traveling merchant, supposedly awkward and unsuccessful, now moving with predatory grace as he realized his mistake. "Clever girl," he said, his friendly demeanor dropping away to reveal something harder beneath. Most people never notice when they're being tracked. Most people aren't worth tracking. Elena kept her distance, calculating exits. "Why are you following me?" "Curious, that's all. You don't fit the pattern of this village. Too smart, too observant. And tonight, there's something different about you. Can't quite identify what, but it's there." He tilted his head, studying her. "Have you been to the old chapel recently? I go there sometimes, to think. It's quiet. Meet anyone there? Anyone unusual?" Elena laughed, hoping it sounded natural. "In an abandoned chapel? Who would I meet? Ghosts? Something like that." The merchant took a step closer, and Elena noticed the silver chain around his neck, previously hidden under his shirt. A hunter's talisman. Word of advice, girl. There are dangerous things in these woods. Ancient things that prey on the innocent. You should stay close to home after dark. "I appreciate your concern," Elena said carefully, "but I've lived here my whole life. I know these woods better than any outsider ever could." Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or calculation. Fair enough. But if you see anything strange, anything that doesn't belong, you come find me or Mr. Ashcroft. We're here to help. I'll remember that." He nodded and walked away, but Elena could feel his attention on her even after he rounded the corner. She waited a full minute before continuing home, her mind racing. They were watching her specifically now. That meant they suspected something, even if they couldn't identify what. She needed to warn Lucien. After a tense dinner with her father, who noticed she was distracted but attributed it to anxiety about the Thomas situation, Elena waited until he was asleep before slipping out. The night was overcast, no moon visible, but her enhanced vision cut through the darkness easily. She made her way to the chapel, taking a circuitous route and doubling back twice to ensure she wasn't followed. Lucien was waiting when she arrived, sitting on the altar like a Renaissance painting come to life. "I felt your fear through the bond," he said without preamble. "What happened?" Elena described her encounter with the merchant, including every detail she could remember. Lucien's expression darkened progressively. "They're closing in faster than I anticipated," he said. "If they're watching you directly, it means they've deduced your importance somehow. Either they saw us together or Ashcroft has sensed the bond." The merchant said I seemed different, that something had changed. "The bond leaves a residual energy signature for the first few days. To most humans it would be undetectable, but trained hunters might sense it." Lucien paced, his movements sharp with agitation. "We need to accelerate our timeline. The festival is in 2 days. We can't wait that long." "What do you suggest?" "We force Ashcroft's hand, draw him out in a controlled confrontation where we have the advantage." Lucien stopped pacing and turned to her. "But it will require you to trust me completely and play a very dangerous role." "Tell me." "We let them capture you." "What?" "Think about it. They're watching you because they believe you're connected to me. If they take you prisoner, use you as bait, Ashcroft will expect me to come for you. He'll set his trap accordingly, in a location he's prepared with all his advantages in place." Lucien's silver eyes gleamed. "But what he won't expect is for you to be the trap." Understanding dawned because of the bond. "I'd know exactly where he's positioned himself, what defenses he has, everything. And you could communicate it all to me telepathically. We've been bonded less than a day. The connection isn't strong enough yet for complex thoughts, but feelings and general impressions should work. You'd be my eyes inside his stronghold." "There's just one problem with this plan," Elena said slowly. "If Ashcroft is as good as you say, he'll have ways to make me talk, ways to verify what I'm telling him." "I know." Lucien's expression was pained. "Which is why this is too dangerous. Forget I suggested it. We'll find another way." But Elena's mind had already seized on the possibility, examining it from all angles. "No, it could work. We just need to make my capture look accidental, not orchestrated. And we'd need to give them enough truth that any interrogation seems successful." "Elena, where would they take me? They must have a base of operations somewhere nearby." Lucien hesitated, then admitted, "Most likely the old Ravencroft cottage. The widow you mentioned, that location has good sightlines, defensible positions, and it's isolated enough that screaming wouldn't alert the village. Then that's where I'll go tomorrow night. I'll make sure the merchant sees me heading toward the chapel, let him follow and capture me. Once I'm inside, I'll assess their setup and feed you information through the bond. And when Ashcroft tortures you for information about me," Lucien's voice was harsh, "because he will, Elena. These hunters have no mercy. Then I'll tell him enough truth to be convincing. That we met at the chapel, that we've talked, that I'm drawn to you despite knowing what you are." She met his gaze steadily. "All of that is true. I'll just omit the bond and the fact that we're working together. You're asking me to let them hurt you while I wait in the shadows, to use you as bait? I'm asking you to trust that I'm strong enough to do this. That I'm choosing this path with full knowledge of the risks. Elena crossed to him and took his cold hands in her warm ones. You've spent 4 centuries surviving alone. Let someone stand with you for once. The conflict on Lucien's face was painful to witness. Through their bond, Elena felt his warring impulses, the instinct to protect her, the knowledge that she was right, the self-loathing at putting her in danger, and underneath it all, a desperate hope that maybe, this time, things could be different. If anything happens to you, he said finally, I'll burn this entire village to ash. Ashcroft, the hunters, every stone and timber. Nothing will happen to me. We'll be connected the whole time. You'll know the instant something goes wrong. She squeezed his hands. But we need to practice the telepathic communication. Right now, I can only send vague feelings. We need more precision. They spent the next 3 hours working on strengthening their mental link. Lucien taught her to focus on specific thoughts, to project images instead of just emotions, to receive the impressions he sent and interpret them correctly. It was exhausting work. Elena's head ached by the end, but she could feel the connection solidifying, becoming more reliable. Try sending me the layout of your cottage, Lucien instructed. Every room, every window. Elena closed her eyes and pictured her home, the main room with the hearth, her small sleeping chamber upstairs, the workshop where her father kept his forge. She felt the thoughts flow through the golden thread connecting them, felt Lucien receiving and processing the information. 2 windows in your bedroom, he said, one facing east, one facing south. The eastern window has a broken latch. That's right. Elena opened her eyes, excited. It's working. It's working now, in a quiet chapel with no distractions or pressure. In the middle of a crisis, with pain and fear muddying your thoughts, it will be much harder. But Lucien looked cautiously optimistic. Still, it's better than nothing. If you can send me even fragmentary images of their setup, it might be enough. They practiced for another hour until Elena was swaying with exhaustion. Lucien noticed immediately and insisted on walking her partway home, though he stayed well back in the shadows to avoid being seen. Tomorrow night, Elena said when they reached the edge of the village, I'll leave the inn around 9. That will give you time to position yourself near the Ravencroft cottage before they bring me there. Elena, Lucien caught her hand, you don't have to do this. We can run. Leave Thornwick. Find some other territory where Ashcroft won't follow. They always follow. You said so yourself. The Ashcrofts are relentless. She smiled sadly. Better to face them here, where we have some advantages, than run and face them somewhere we don't. When did you become so wise? I've always been wise. You just took a while to notice. She turned to go, then paused. Lucien, through the bond, I can feel that you're afraid. Not for yourself, for me. You should know, I'm afraid too. But I'm more afraid of living a small, silent life than I am of dying for something that matters. She left him standing in the shadows and returned home, where she lay awake for hours, feeling his presence through the bond like a candle flame in darkness, steady, constant, and impossibly fragile. The next day crawled past with agonizing slowness. Elena worked her shift at the inn, hyper-aware of Dorian Ashcroft watching her from his corner table. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps 35, with dark hair graying at the temples and eyes that missed nothing. When she brought his lunch, he smiled pleasantly. "You're Miss Blackwood, aren't you? The blacksmith's daughter." "Yes, sir." Elena kept her voice respectfully neutral. "I've heard you're quite knowledgeable about local history, the folklore of this region." He sipped his wine. "Perhaps you could spare a few minutes to speak with me. I'm compiling notes for my research." "I'm afraid I'm not very educated, sir. My father needed me in the workshop more than in the schoolroom." Sometimes the uneducated have the most authentic knowledge, stories passed down through families, uncorrupted by academic analysis. His gaze was intense. For instance, what can you tell me about the old manor on Widow's Peak? Any legends associated with it? Elena pretended to think. There are stories that it's haunted, that the last owner dabbled in dark practices, and his spirit still walks the halls. But those are just village superstitions. Are they? Ashcroft leaned back. In my experience, Miss Blackwood, superstitions often contain kernels of truth. The challenge is separating fact from embellishment. He pulled out a leather notebook. Have you ever been inside the manor? Once, as a child, on a dare. It was just an abandoned house, dusty and falling apart. No unusual sensations? No feeling of being watched? Only by mice and spiders. Elena forced a laugh. I'm sorry I can't be more helpful with your research. On the contrary, you've been very helpful indeed. Ashcroft's smile didn't reach his eyes. One more question, if you'll indulge me. Have you noticed anyone unusual in the village recently? Strangers who keep odd hours, perhaps? The irony of the question coming from a stranger who kept odd hours wasn't lost on Elena. Only you and your companion, sir. The widow at Ravencroft Cottage and the traveling merchant. But Thornwick is small. Any newcomer stands out. Quite right. He made a note in his book. Thank you for your time, Miss Blackwood. Enjoy the rest of your day. Elena retreated to the kitchen, her heart pounding. Through the bond, she could feel Lucian's tension. He was awake despite the daylight, sensing her distress. She sent him a wave of reassurance and felt his reluctant acceptance in return. The afternoon dragged on. Elena served customers, helped Mrs. Weatherby with preparations for the festival, and tried not to watch the clock. At 8:30, she hung up her apron and said her goodnights. The autumn air was crisp as she stepped outside, and she could feel eyes on her immediately. She didn't look around. Instead, she walked casually toward the edge of the village, as if simply heading home. But when she reached the fork in the road, one path leading to her cottage, the other toward the woods and the chapel, she hesitated visibly, then turned toward the woods. The presence following her became more obvious. Elena increased her pace slightly, as if nervous, and heard footsteps behind her quicken in response. She was perhaps 50 yards into the woods when a hand clamped over her mouth and an arm locked around her waist. "Don't scream," the merchant whispered in her ear, his earlier awkwardness completely gone. "We just want to talk." Elena struggled convincingly, her enhanced strength carefully modulated to seem human. The merchant was strong, though, trained for this. He dragged her backward off the path into the deeper shadows where a second figure waited. The widow from Ravencroft Cottage, no longer dressed in mourning black, but in practical leather and wool. She held a cloth soaked in something sharp-smelling. "This will make things easier," she said, pressing the cloth over Elena's nose and mouth. Elena had no choice but to breathe. The chemical stench filled her lungs, and darkness rose up like a tide. Her last conscious thought was sending an image to Lucian, two figures, the woods, being carried, before the drug pulled her under. She woke to cold water splashing her face. Elena gasped and opened her eyes, taking in her surroundings with her enhanced senses. She was in the Ravencroft cottage, tied to a chair in what had once been a parlor. The windows were covered with heavy curtains, and the room was lit by multiple oil lamps. The merchant stood by the door, now armed with a crossbow. The widow was checking Elena's bonds. And Dorian Ashcroft sat in a chair opposite her, his notebook open on his lap. "Welcome back, Miss Blackwood," he said pleasantly. "I apologize for the crude methods, but time is of the essence. The vampire you've been meeting at the chapel, we need to know everything about him." Elena's head throbbed from the drug, but her mind was clear enough. She tested her bonds subtly, tight but not impossibly so. More importantly, she could feel Lucien through the bond, close by and alert. She sent him an image of the room layout, the positions of the three hunters, the weapons she could see. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, letting fear color her voice, not entirely feigned. "Please don't insult my intelligence. We've been watching you for days. You visit the abandoned chapel every other night, always around midnight. You stay for hours. And 3 nights ago, something changed about you. Your energy signature shifted in ways that can only mean one thing." Ashcroft leaned forward. "You've bonded with him." Elena's stomach clenched. He knew, or suspected strongly enough that denial was useless. She changed tactics. "If you already know, why do you need me?" "Because I need details. How old is he? What are his specific abilities? Where does he shelter during the day?" Ashcroft pulled out a silver knife, letting lamplight glint off the blade. "I can make this very unpleasant, Miss Blackwood, or you can cooperate and walk out of here unharmed. Your choice." Through the bond, Elena felt Lucien's rage, a cold, ancient fury that made her shiver. She sent him a feeling, patience, not yet. "His name is Lucien Ashmore," she said quietly, giving Ashcroft truth mixed with misdirection. "He came to Thornwick 6 months ago, seeking refuge from hunters like you. He's been here since the Elizabethan era, which makes him over 400 years old." "Ashmore," Ashcroft wrote rapidly. "Any known associates? Other vampires he's contacted?" "He's alone. That's why he came here, to hide from his past." Elena met his eyes. "He hasn't killed anyone in Thornwick. He feeds on animals, helps protect the village from wolves. He just wants to be left in peace." "A vampire's peace always comes at someone's cost," the widow said coldly. "They're parasites by nature. The only parasites I see are people who hunt others for existing." Elena let her anger show. "What gives you the right to decide who lives and who dies?" Ashcroft's expression hardened. "The bodies give us that right. The centuries of death and destruction your peaceful vampire and his kind have caused. We don't hunt for sport, Miss Blackwood. We hunt to save lives. Lucien hasn't taken any lives here. Not yet. But he will. They always do." Ashcroft stood and moved closer, the silver knife still in his hand. "Now, the information I really need. Where does he sleep during the day?" This was the critical moment. Elena had to give him something believable, something that would satisfy his interrogation, while sending Lucien the real plan through their bond. She focused hard, projecting an image. The stone circle in the woods, the threshold place. That was where the confrontation would happen, not wherever Ashcroft was planning. Out loud, she said, "The old manor on Widow's Peak. There's a cellar beneath the cellar, a hidden chamber he discovered. He has a coffin there, lined with soil from his birthplace." It was classic vampire lore, believable enough to be accepted. Ashcroft smiled slightly. "See, that wasn't so difficult. A few more questions, and we'll be done. The bond you share, can you communicate with him mentally?" "Sometimes," Elena lied. "Only vague feelings, nothing specific." "Can he track your location through it?" "I think so, but I'm not certain." "Perfect." Ashcroft gestured to the widow. "Margaret, prepare the cage. Thomas, check the perimeter sigils. I want everything ready within the hour." The merchant, Thomas, nodded and slipped out the door. Margaret disappeared into a back room, leaving Elena alone with Ashcroft. "You genuinely care for him," Ashcroft observed, studying her face. "I can see it in your eyes. You actually believe he's different from the others." "He is different." "No, Miss Blackwood. He simply had more time to perfect his lies." Ashcroft crouched in front of her chair, his expression almost pitying. "I've been hunting vampires for 15 years. I've heard every variation of the same story. The remorseful vampire, the one who only kills the wicked, the one who's trying to resist his nature. They're all lies. Vampires are predators. It's not something they choose. It's what they are. You're wrong about Lucien. Am I? Tell me, has he explained why he bonded with you? What he gains from it? When Elena didn't answer, Ashcroft nodded. He gains a human anchor, someone who legitimizes his presence here, who makes him seem less threatening. He gains your blood willingly given, which is far more potent than stolen blood. And most importantly, he gains a hostage. The bond makes you vulnerable to him in ways you can't imagine. That's not why he did it, isn't it? Ashcroft stood. When we kill him, Miss Blackwood, you'll feel it through the bond. You'll experience his death as if it were your own. It will be the most agonizing pain you've ever known. That's his insurance policy. He's betting that your screams will make us hesitate. Give him an opening. His voice softened. I'm truly sorry you got caught up in this, but the vampire dies tonight, and there's nothing you can do to stop it. He left the room, leaving Elena alone with her bonds and her racing thoughts. Through the bond, she felt Lucien prowling outside, waiting for the right moment. She sent him everything she'd learned. 3 hunters, weapons including crossbows and silver, sigils being placed around the perimeter, and Ashcroft's plan to use the bond against them. Lucien's response was a feeling of grim determination. He'd already deduced most of it. Margaret returned carrying a silver cage, small, barely 3 feet on each side. Elena's enhanced vision caught the symbols etched into every bar, binding magic meant to contain supernatural creatures. Her stomach turned as she realized the plan. They'd put her in the cage as bait, using her to lure Lucien into a trap he couldn't escape. Nothing personal, Margaret said as she positioned the cage near the window. You seem like a decent girl. Wrong place, wrong fascination. How did you get into this? Elena asked, genuinely curious. Hunting vampires? Margaret paused, something dark crossing her face. My daughter was 17 when a vampire decided she'd make an interesting pet. By the time we found her, 3 months later, there wasn't enough left to bury. She met Elena's eyes, her expression hard as stone. So don't expect sympathy from me. Whatever lies your vampire told you, whatever feelings you think you share, it's all manipulation. They're incapable of genuine emotion. You're wrong, Elena said quietly. I felt what he feels through the bond. The loneliness, the regret, the desperate hope for something different. That's not manipulation. That's pain. Then it's pain he's earned through 4 centuries of causing pain to others. Margaret checked the cage's lock. We'll see how much he truly cares about you when he has to choose between saving you and saving himself. Thomas returned, nodding to Margaret. Perimeter is set. The sigils will activate the moment he crosses the boundary. He won't be able to leave the immediate area. Good. Dorian wants him focused on the cage. We'll position ourselves on the 3 sides, crossfire pattern, silver-tipped bolts. Margaret pulled Elena to her feet, bonds and all, and guided her toward the cage. If you care about that monster at all, Miss Blackwood, convince him not to come. He'll die tonight, and it won't be quick. Elena didn't waste breath arguing. She was pushed into the silver cage, the bars burning her skin where they touched, the binding magic making her feel sick and disoriented. The door locked with an ominous click. Ashcroft entered as they finished positioning the cage prominently in the window. Everything ready? Yes. Once he sees her in the cage, instinct will override caution. He'll come through the window and we'll have him in a kill box. Thomas checked his crossbow's tension. No escape, no survival. Don't underestimate him, Ashcroft warned. Lucien Ashmore has survived 4 centuries of hunters. He's not alive by accident. He glanced at Elena in her cage. But even ancient predators have weaknesses. She's his. They extinguished most of the lamps, leaving just enough light to make Elena visible from outside. Then they took their positions. Ashcroft to the left of the window, Margaret to the right, Thomas at the back of the room. All had crossbows trained on the approach vector. Elena tested the cage bars carefully. The silver burned, but not unbearably. More concerning was the magic woven through them. She could feel it suppressing her enhanced abilities, dampening the bond with Lucien. She could still sense him, but the connection was muffled, as if reaching him through thick fog. She closed her eyes and concentrated hard, pushing a thought through the weakened bond. It's a trap. 3 crossbows. Don't come through the window. The response was faint but clear. I know. Trust me. Minutes passed like hours. Elena's heart pounded so loudly she was certain the hunters could hear it. Through the bond, she felt Lucien approaching, not directly toward the cottage, but circling, testing the perimeter. Then she felt him hit the sigil boundary. The magical barrier activated with a flash visible even to human eyes, and Lucien's presence through the bond suddenly felt caged, constrained to a small area around the cottage. He's here, Ashcroft said. Nobody move until my signal. Silence descended, broken only by the cottage's settling creaks and Elena's shallow breathing. She stared at the window, dreading and hoping in equal measure. Then Lucien appeared at the window. He looked wild in the darkness, eyes glowing silver, fangs visible, every predatory instinct on display. When he saw Elena in the silver cage, his expression twisted with rage. "Let her go," he snarled, his voice carrying easily through the glass. "Your quarrel is with me, not her." "Your attachment to her gave us the leverage we needed," Ashcroft called back. "Come inside, Lucien Ashmore. Face justice for the crimes of your kind." "Justice?" Lucien laughed bitterly. "You speak of justice while using an innocent woman as bait? The only crime here is yours. Inside, now, or we start cutting pieces off her until you comply." Elena saw the calculation flash across Lucien's face, weighing options, assessing odds. Through the bond, she felt his decision crystallize. He was going to do something desperate. "As you wish," Lucien said softly. He didn't come through the window. Instead, he crashed through the cottage's back wall in an explosion of timber and plaster. The hunter spun toward the sound, but Lucien was already moving, a blur of inhuman speed that made him almost impossible to track. He hit Thomas first, sending the merchant flying across the room before he could fire. Margaret got off a shot, but Lucien twisted away, and the bolt buried itself in the wall. Then he was on her, disarming her with brutal efficiency. Ashcroft remained calm, his crossbow trained on Lucien. "Stop, or I put this bolt through the girl's heart. Silver-tipped, blessed by a priest. She'll die in agony while you watch." Lucien froze, crouched and ready to spring, his eyes locked on the hunter. "You'd kill an innocent to get to me? She stopped being innocent when she bonded with you." Ashcroft's aim didn't waver. "Back away from Margaret. Move to the center of the room, hands visible." For a terrible moment, Elena thought Lucien would refuse, would force a confrontation that could only end badly. But through the bond, she felt his surrender, not of will, but of tactic. He was buying time, looking for an opening. Lucien straightened slowly and moved to the room's center, hands raised. "You have me. Let Elena go." "I don't think so. The girl is leverage until you're properly contained." Ashcroft gestured to Margaret, who pulled out a set of silver shackles etched with more binding symbols. "Put these on. Any resistance, and she dies. Elena watched helplessly as Margaret approached Lucian with the shackles. She could feel his humiliation through the bond. 4 centuries of freedom about to be stolen by silver and magic. But underneath the humiliation was calculation. He was planning something. Margaret snapped the first shackle around his wrist. The silver sizzled against his skin, and binding magic flared. She reached for his other hand. And Lucian moved. He broke Margaret's wrist with a casual twist, then yanked the shackle free despite the burning silver, and threw it directly at Ashcroft. The hunter dodged, but it gave Lucian the seconds he needed to reach Elena's cage. His hands closed around the silver bars, and Elena smelt burning flesh as he ripped the cage door off its hinges. Magic sparked and died as the binding broke. "Hold on to me," he commanded, pulling her free. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck, and Lucian leapt upward, crashing through the cottage roof with Elena held tight against him. Crossbow bolts chased them into the night sky. One grazed Lucian's shoulder, silver burning into him. But then they were falling, landing in the woods beyond the cottage perimeter. "Run!" Lucian gasped, pushing her away. "The sigils, I'm trapped in this area. You're not. Run to the stone circle. I'll find a way to follow." "I'm not leaving you!" Elena. A bolt slammed into the tree beside them, and they both ducked. The hunters were emerging from the destroyed cottage, weapons ready. Lucian shoved Elena toward the woods. "Go! That's an order!" She ran, her enhanced speed carrying her through the darkness faster than she'd ever moved. Behind her, she heard crossbows firing, heard Lucian's roar of defiance, heard the hunters shouting orders. The bond stretched thin and painful as distance grew between them, but she could still feel him fighting, still feel his determination that she survive. The stone circle was half a mile away. Elena pushed herself harder, branches whipping past, her lungs burning despite her enhanced endurance. She could feel Lucian through the bond. He was injured, the silver poisoning spreading through his system, but still fighting, still buying her time. She burst into the stone circle gasping, and immediately felt the threshold place respond to her presence. The air thickened, crackling with potential. This was where they'd formed their bond, where their blood had mixed. The stones remembered. Elena ran to the circle's center and cut her wrist with a sharp rock, letting blood fall onto the ancient ground. "I call the bond," she said, remembering Lucian's words about threshold places and blood magic. "I call him here. Lucian Ashmore, come to me." The stones flared with cold light, and the bond between them suddenly blazed into brilliant clarity. Through it, she could see what Lucian saw. Ashcroft closing in, crossbow aimed at his heart. No escape possible within the sigil boundary. But threshold places existed outside normal rules. The stone circle was neither fully of this world nor fully of the supernatural realm. It was a doorway, and Elena had just opened it. Lucian felt the pull through the bond and surrendered to it. One moment he was trapped in the killing ground near the cottage. The next he was falling through space and shadow, pulled by blood and binding to the place where their connection had been forged. He materialized in the stone circle beside Elena, collapsing to his knees as silver poisoning wrecked his body. Elena caught him, her blood-smeared wrist pressed against his mouth. "Drink," she commanded. "You need to heal." Lucian hesitated only a moment before his fangs pierced her wrist. The connection between them exploded into intensity as he drank, bond and blood intermingling. Elena gasped at the sensation, not pain, but overwhelming intimacy, like Lucian was inside her soul. When he released her wrist, his wounds were already healing, the silver working its way out of his system. But they had only seconds before the hunters found them. "The stones," Lucian said urgently, pulling her to her feet. "They're a threshold. We can use them to escape completely. but it requires a significant sacrifice. What kind of sacrifice? Permanent exile from this place. Once we cross through, we can never return to Thornwick or any location within 50 miles. The threshold will close behind us, forbidding our re-entry. His eyes searched hers. Elena, it means leaving your father, your home, everything you've known. Shouts echoed through the woods. The hunters were coming. Elena looked at the stones, at Lucian, at the path leading back to Thornwick. Her father was there, probably asleep, unaware his daughter was about to vanish from his life forever. The smithy where she'd grown up, the village that had shaped her, all of it would be lost. But staying meant death, for her, for Lucian, possibly for innocents caught in the crossfire. "How do we activate the threshold?" she asked. "You're certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything. Tell me how." Lucian pulled her to the largest standing stone where ancient symbols were carved deep into the rock. Blood on the symbol of passage, spoken intent and willingness to accept the price. He drew his own blood with a fang and pressed his bleeding palm to one symbol. "I, Lucian Ashmore, request passage beyond. I accept exile as the price." Elena did the same, cutting her hand on the rock's sharp edge and pressing her palm to the matching symbol. "I, Elena Blackwood, request passage beyond. I accept exile as the price." The stones erupted with light, cold, blue-white brilliance that turned the night into day. Between the two largest stones, reality began to tear, revealing glimpses of other places, other possibilities. Crossbow bolts flew into the circle, but the light bent around Elena and Lucian, deflecting them harmlessly. Ashcroft's voice rang out, "Stop! You don't know what you're doing! Those thresholds are unstable!" "More stable than staying here," Lucian shouted back. He took Elena's bleeding hand in his. "Ready?" "Together," she agreed. They stepped into the light.